Today I propose to the Pauper community a mono-white zombie deck. The purpose of this video is not to showcase a perfected Pauper deck, but rather to tell you about it and get some feedback on what could make it better. The deck idea came from the card in Oketra's name, which doesn't really see much play. I thought it would be fun, and I basically already had all the zombies anyway. So let's start off by showing off those zombies. Mummy Paramount is crucial in the deck, seeing as it gets a 1/1 buff every time a zombie enters under our control. The purpose of the deck is basically white weenie zombies, so we need the creatures to buff themselves and such. There are 4 of these in the deck. Fanbearer acts as our cheap body that can tap out threats as needed, so there are 4 of these. Binding Mummy is another zombie ETB that taps artifacts and creatures, and keep in mind 14 of the creatures in this deck are zombies, so the goal is to have all these ETB triggers effects happen a lot. 2 Binding Mummies in the deck. Disposal Mummy exiles a card from an opponent's graveyard on ETB, so not too shabby. This effect sometimes isn't useful though, so there are only 2 of these in the main deck. Sparring Mummy has the highest mana value in the deck at 4, and upon entry untaps a target creature. Use this with the Fanbearers from before and just have a fun time tapping away opponents' creatures. Now, as I said before, the deck idea came from in Oketra's name, so of course there are going to be 4 of these. At instant speed, all our zombies gain +2/+1 until end of turn. There are also other creatures in the deck that I'll mention later, but they also get a 1/1 buff. It's a fantastic card that can really come out of nowhere, and the fact that it beefs up all our creatures, even if they're not zombies, it's just awesome. Since we're going to be casting creatures, then beefing them up, then repeating, I added 4 copies of Guardian's Pledge. This is another creature buff for the turn, but this time it gives all our white creatures +2/+2. And since the creatures in the deck are all white, so there's no sorceries in the deck, so we'll just have a ton of fun swinging around our white weenies, okay? That was a bad line. Okay, we'll just cut that out. Moving on from that, we need to get some cards into our hands as card advantage. Here we go. We got Thraben Inspector, of course, lets us investigate, granting clues to be used to draw cards later. 4 of these in the deck. And because we love white creatures, we'll add 4 Spirited Companions to the deck as well. Simple creature that draws us a card upon entry, and what I like about our instant speed creature buffs from before is that they'll affect Thraben Inspector and Spirited Companion as well, even though the zombies get a bigger buff from Oketra's name. I've got 2 acrobatic maneuvers to flicker a creature, and it also draws us a card. It might seem a little bit weird, but remember all the ETB effects from before. This will help trigger mummies and maybe some card draw effects. Repel the Darkness acts as another tricky combat spell that could tap down up to 2 of our opponent's creatures. I'm looking at those big dinosaur decks or Kiln Fiend decks or anything like that, and this also draws us a card because we don't want to be lacking on answers. And finally, for the main deck, I've got 4 copies of Unmake. 3 mana to exile creature ain't bad. Now moving to the sideboard, we've got our other 2 copies of Disposal Mummy for the graveyard heavy decks just in case, 3 copies of Jiero's Resolve to give pseudo vigilance to something and prevent all damage that's dealt to that creature, and it's also got cycling just in case we don't need it at any given moment, and it's also a flavor win, so I really like it. Moment of Silence is fantastic as well, forcing other players to skip their combat phase. This is saved for all the combat heavy decks out there like Slivers or Boggles. There are 4 copies here. Homestead Courage is one I bet you've never heard of from Midnight Hunt. For just 1 white mana, we can put a +1/+1 counter on one of our creatures and give it vigilance for a turn. It also has flashback for the same cost. Making our creatures as big as we can, then swinging is key, so I felt like this helped out a bit. And finally, 2 copies of You Hear Something on Watch. This one was really quite good as well. Another temporary anthem effect granting +1/+1 for the turn, but it also has a fantastic secondary ability that deals 5 damage to an attacking creature. This can really help against Gurmag Anglers and Tolarian Terrors. Maybe I should just add a couple more. There are also 18 planes in the deck, as well as 1 copy of each of these: Kabira Crossroads, Sandstone Bridge, Secluded Steppe, and the Fair Basilica. Each of these has its place, and I couldn't decide which ones to put where, so I just did 1 of each. Gaining life is fun for white, but cycling is also good. But of course, in a creature-centric deck, you want some of the combat buffs, and who could be without an emergency draw ability? Let me know which ones you guys would actually play. Well, that's it. Here's a full deck list again. Pause right now to get a good look, or find the link to it in the description below. This deck also only costs $24.07 as of the making of this video, so you're definitely not going to break the bank on this one. I've actually played with this deck a few times in practice settings, and it was pretty darn fun. But now you need to let me know in the comments what I got right and what I didn't get right. There's probably a ton I didn't get right. This really needs to be a discussion because I really want suggestions on how to make this even better to compete with the big boys. Thanks for all that, and make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss your weekly dose of magic.